Well, now it's everyone's job, because the only way that we're going to get enough leverage in the early and middle stages of the journey, when there's no opportunity to meet prospects yet, is content needs to stand in for us and be our proxy. So how do we make sure that we're getting a two-pronged emotional reaction? How do we make sure that people see what we're talking about, our subject matter expertise, our thought leadership, and they're like, wow, this is super helpful. I never thought about it this way. Now I totally get it now. And what else do they have to say?
Hey there, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI and the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. Data center sales teams face many challenges. For example, empowered buyers now explore options at their own pace. The buyers are in the driver's seat, and many times they're bypassing early sales interactions. Actually, most of the time they're now doing that because information is abundant, but attention is scarce. So your content, your sales enablement needs to captivate. During the early stages of the buyer's journeys, sales teams are now completely out of the loop most of the time. To help you and your team adapt to the way that modern buyers evaluate, compare, and purchase data center-related technologies, facilities, and services, we hosted a webinar called Data Center Sales Has Changed. Is your team living in the past? In this episode of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, excerpted from that webinar, you'll learn how to build and maintain trusted advisor relationships with your prospects and clients. You'll see how you can differentiate from the competition so that your team can be the premier provider in your segment. You'll learn how to improve processes and productivity so that your team can produce more consistent results. You'll get tips on how to identify and fill in gaps that are standing in your way, plus how to attract and close more of the right clients. This webinar is especially critical for sales, marketing, customer success, CS, product and channel partnership professionals in the data center industry. But before we jump in, to make sure that you get notified about upcoming episodes of this podcast, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that you can find at dcsmi.com. So let's jump right in and get started.
Welcome to Data Center Sales Has Changed. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, and I am thrilled to have you with us today for our webinar that's going to be deep diving into, is your sales team ready for the present and the future, or is it living in the past? During today's webinar, we're going to be talking all about how you can prepare for today's data center leads, how you can rethink your data center sales team priorities, and how you can reinvent data center sales professionals for the AI era. A little bit of background housekeeping before we jump right in. My focus is on helping data center sales teams, data center go-to-market teams in general, differentiate, get found earlier on in the sales cycle, achieve trusted advisor status, and command premium pricings to drive sustained, profitable revenue growth. I've presented at some of the industry's most popular events, including Critical Facilities Summit, Data Center World, Data Center Dynamics Hosting Con, and MSP Expo. I've served on the boards of a number of IT and entrepreneurial and product-related organizations. I'm a former contractor for both IBM and Microsoft, and was involved for over 10 years with the HubSpot ecosystem partner community. I bring over 20 years of experience in and around the data center industry, including with co-location and wholesale, construction, cooling, cybersecurity, decommissioning, over 15 years with managed service providers, a ton of work with both traditional software and AI SaaS companies. Was very fortunate to be in the right place with AI SaaS a few years ago, as well as in and around telecommunications. DCSMI is all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM teams in the growth of the data center industry. Whenever I plan a webinar like this, I'm always super interested in making sure that I deliver the most value by understanding what's top of mind for you. So Most of you, when you registered for today's webinar, would have been asked, what is your biggest sales and marketing challenge? So we got the consensus on that. You can see some of that up there on the screen, including leads, exposure and brand awareness, go-to-market for data centers, competing with cloud, and attracting data center clients. We'll be addressing those questions towards the end of today's webinar. And if you have any additional questions you think of during today's webinar, feel free to put those in the chat pane there, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as possible. So what is on the agenda for today's webinar? We're going to talk specifically about what you need to do to get ready for today's data center leads. We'll look at how you can rethink the priorities among your data center sales strategy, your data center playbook, and why it's so important to be rethinking those. And then we'll talk about what needs to be done to reinvent your data center sales professionals to thrive in the AI era. We'll shift gears for a few minutes towards the end to talk about some recommended resources and a special offer. So if you want to make sure that you learn about that, make sure you stay till the end of today's webinar. And again, at the end of today's webinar, I'll also have some time for some question and answer. So to set the tone for where we are and where we're going, I thought I would just take a moment and take a stroll back on memory lane in the data center. Way back in the early 2010s, it seems like decades ago now, buyers were relatively uninformed. We thought they were, but in reality, if we think about all the access that they have to information right now, on a relative basis, it was pretty 1.0. There was a very linear buyer's journey. And in terms of what to do next, there was like an early stage playbook that was overwhelmingly focused on cold prospecting using cold emails, cold phone calls, not so much cold LinkedIn because LinkedIn was still pretty early at that point, and a lot of brand ads, a lot of field marketing. That was way back in the early 2010s. So where are we today? Today, we're looking at like NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, having their big conference and going on stage predicting that there's going to be $1 trillion USD flowing into data center upgrades over the next 4 years. $1 trillion with a T, not billion, like 1,000 billions, a million millions. $1 trillion in data center upgrades are coming into this industry over the next few years as data centers get ready for AI and GPT and large language models and high performance computing. And Jensen Huang isn't alone. Michael Dell, who most of us that have been in around the IT industry for decades, basically modernized the PC industry, predicting 100-fold growth in data center demand over the next 10 years. It is staggering the opportunities that are in front of us. So the question is, what do we need to do to prepare? Well, we need to be realistic enough to understand that although this is an enormous opportunity, the way people research and make their purchase decisions has changed quite dramatically. Web 1.0, 2.0, the large language models, ChatGPT, and 4 years of people working from home, especially knowledge workers, has permanently changed buyer behavior. Everyone is now an expert. There's infinite product research and comparison options available. And in many cases, when it comes to commodities, no salesperson is required. So we have to work extra hard to figure out how we stay relevant in the coming months and in the coming years. And if you look at what you see there on the screen there, Gartner is predicting that now 83% of a typical B2B buyer's journey, researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing, is now over before we get to meet a prospect. This is a massive difference from as recently as 5 years ago when that number was hovering in the 50th percentile. I think it was 56 was the number. About half of the buyer's journey was over before sales contact. Now it's over 80% of the buyer's journey is over before sales contact. And this isn't just outliers. This is pretty much everyone. McKinsey found that 70 to 80% of B2B buyers now prefer a digital journey. So what do we do to stay relevant? How do we make sure that our data center sales team is out in front? Well, thought leadership is a huge part of this. And traditionally, if we were having this conversation, if we took the stroll back on memory lane in the early 2000s and I said thought leadership, you would have said, that's marketing's job. Sales isn't going to get involved in thought leadership. Well, it has changed. I find in most of the consultations, most of the strategy work that I do with companies in and around the data center industry, we're talking about how to get marketing teams going deeper into the buyer's journey and bringing sales teams back earlier into the buyer's journey, because we need to be found. We need to be present in that first 83% when people are figuring things out and all the brand preferences are being formed. And so, if you're not the one teaching people what to look for, somebody else will. And what a lot of this comes down to is figuring out how we convey trust. I've been giving this talk on how data center sales has changed for a number of years now. And when I first started giving this talk in the mid to late 2010s, I looked just at like Statista as an aggregator of sentiment around this. Now I go to Copilot, and Copilot gives me not only the consensus on Statista, it gives me what Yale and Newsweek and Ipsos and WebMD all think about this. So the most trustworthy professions, according to the survey data, nurses for the 20th consecutive year, right after that, physicians, grade school teachers, not so much middle school and high school teachers, but grade school teachers, pharmacists, and members of the military. The least trustworthy professions, it doesn't call out IT sales or data center sales specifically, but sales is on there, car salespeople. So obviously we want to make sure that we put a lot of distance between how we're perceived and somebody purchasing car. Not surprisingly, not going to get into politics there, but you can see at the top of the list there, members of Congress, least trustworthy. Journalists, kind of surprising that we've reached the point where journalism isn't held in high regard and is less trustworthy now. Advertising executives and business executives. So what can we do to make sure that we're educating and building trust as early on in the journey as possible? Billy Joel actually saw this coming decades ago in one of his pop hits in the mid-1980s. It's a matter of trust. It's always been a matter of trust. So what do we do to make sure that we're on the right side of trust with all of this? Great content pulls people towards you and your company. Conversely, not having the great content, you're just not getting found. And again, if I was talking with you 10, 15 years ago, you would have said, content, that's marketing's job. Well, now it's everyone's job, because the only way that we're going to get enough leverage in the early and middle stages of the journey, when there's no opportunity to meet prospects yet, is content needs to stand in for us and be our proxy. So how do we make sure that we're getting a two-pronged emotional reaction? How do we make sure that people see what we're talking about, our subject matter expertise, our thought leadership, and they're like, wow, this is super helpful. I never thought about it this way. Now I totally get it now. And what else do they have to say? If you get that two-pronged emotional reaction of wow, and what else do they have to say, then you're on the right track with all of this. The challenge essentially is, how do you get access to prospects as early as possible, and the awareness and the consideration stages of the journey before the decision point, in a marketplace that continually is allergic to early stage sales interactions? So when we think about a simple buyer's journey, 3 stages here. Awareness, there's a broad-based problem that somebody knows they have or a goal they're trying to achieve. In the middle, in the consideration stage, they're weighing the different options that are available to them, weighing the pros and cons. The decision stage is where most of us show up with our content. And frankly, in many cases, if we're only getting found in the decision stage and we didn't have a relationship with those prospects and there's other stakeholders on those accounts in the awareness and consideration, we're probably now getting there too late, because purchase preferences, loyalty, brand affinity, all the criteria that they're using to judge you and ultimately make the decision is being decided by somebody else who managed to figure out a way to get in there and have a good relationship with your prospects in awareness and consideration. So you and your team might have ignored these trends for years, but innovators have been investing in these kinds of initiatives for years. And these screenshots were literally taken a couple of years ago, back the first time when I did this talk. You can see how Equinix does its lead segmentation across different industries and different job roles and different solution categories. And you don't have to have the resources of Equinix. You can be a 1 to 10 person startup or an 11 to 50 person relatively small company. And if you're wearing the role of product strategist or a go-to-market strategist or sales strategist. You need to figure out segmentation, because if you're saying everything to everyone, you're saying nothing to no one. Tier points figure this out as well. This is an example of an ebook on hybrid cloud, gated content, providing enough promise of value on the landing page that people are willing to basically give them their virtual business card information to get access to the resource on the other side of the page. And Sixtera now going forward is going to be named to Center Square, investing in decision stage offers like scheduling a facilities tour or getting a quote. So you may have been asleep on the sidelines with all of this, but it's super important to make sure going forward that there's 28 touch points. Most market research firms are counting 28 or 30 touch points that happen between when someone is first figuring out a problem and when they actually make a purchase decision. So the question is, how many of those 28 touch points throughout the full journey can you and your sales team be involved in a way that you're surrounding at all times your best prospects and your target accounts? And I can tell you without a doubt that if most of your budget is going into field marketing and event marketing on the big cabana party or the big golf tournament, that's great for a day. But what about the other 364 days a year when that prospect is looking for solutions? So how do we rethink how sales teams need to prioritize with this going forward? Well, first, we need to walk a mile in the shoes of our prospects, and we need to think about how our own preferences have changed recently. When you're looking to buy something on Amazon, and I'm talking about actually buying physical stuff on Amazon as opposed to AWS, how often do you book a meeting to talk with a salesperson from Amazon or pick up the phone and dial an 800 number to talk with someone from Amazon? Has that ever happened? When you're ordering from DoorDash or Instacart, how often do you call for help and listen to music on hold? When you're booking a ride to the airport using Lyft or Uber, how often do you have to fill out a form and wait a day or two back to get a price quote, if you get a price quote back at all? Those things like never happen, right? And we've gotten used to the fact that all the self-service and instant gratification, what I call, if you ever saw the Willy Wonka movie, there was the character Veruca Salt, right? Don't care how, I want it now. Instant gratification is the way the world, those are people's this new expectations, like, hey, Google, what's the difference between? Hey, Alexa, what does this cost? Siri, who's the best company in my town? Copilot, tell me the answer to this. ChatGPT, tell me the answer to that. And along comes AI chatbots and really ups the ante even more than this self-driven, self-propelled buyer's journey has been in recent years. And there's always for people that are active on LinkedIn, and the reality is if you're serious about data center sales and you're not serious about LinkedIn, you are missing out on the 724 365 conference that's going on all the time. Because when somebody is standing in their colo center next to the cages and they're trying to figure out what to do, let me ask my friends and colleagues on LinkedIn what they think. This is the B2C, the business to business eventuality. The habits that we discover, things that we start out doing in our personal lives at home will almost always, within a matter of weeks or months, transfer over into our professional lives. Even if there's a gatekeeper or a blocker in the office who says, thou shalt not use this technology. Remember the consumerization of IT, how that was a big deal 15 or 20 years ago? It reminded me of the Dilbert cartoon with Mordak, the preventer of IT, right? How long did that last? It's the same thing now. Obviously, companies that are in regulated spaces are figuring out the governance risk and compliance issues around LLMs and chatbots and everything. That's going to get figured out. At some point, they're going to figure out the copyright issues and the regulatory issues and the security issues. All of the habits that we first use at home are going to become a very, very big deal in the workplace. And if you think about, I've talked about for years the 5 pillars for revenue growth, making sure that you're balanced and focused on differentiation, not just what you think your differentiation is, but what the marketplace thinks your differentiation is. How do you get in front with thought leadership? How do you use this for more effective competitive positioning? What can you do to cover the full buyer's journey? So we're there in awareness and consideration and decision. So you're anticipating what one of your more important buyer personas wants to do next. And you're a step in front of them, and you use that for sales cycle acceleration and rolling this all together in a way that leads to scalable, predictable revenue growth. And in a lot of ways going forward, at the risk of oversimplifying, I'd encourage you to think about your data center sales professionals how to position them more as Big Four consultants. What do I mean by Big Four consultants? It's a nickname given to the biggest four largest global professional services: Deloitte, Ernst & Young, EY, KPMG, and PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Because the sales strategy shift is already well underway. Your sales team no longer needs to really focus just on selling your company's products and services. Instead, your sales team needs to get better at helping your most important buyers research and get through their purchase process and comparing their options, like a concierge or like a tour guide or like a Big Four consultant. Your interactions, your account executives, your sales development reps, marketing, customer success, all of this should feel so good and so valuable in the eyes of the beholder, in the eyes of your buyer persona, that should feel like they're getting free consulting from a Big Four entity. Your sales team needs to be seen as teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, and thought leaders. And to do that the right way, once they do this the right way and they're really tuned into the targeting, they should be able to recognize great fit prospects and just differentiate them, distinguish them between marginal fit prospects and bad fit prospects. Because in a world where so much of your flywheel momentum and so much of your future growth depends on digital word of mouth, you can no longer afford to have your sales team bringing on bad fit clients. They can't just close for the sake of closing or getting the deal closed no matter what. They have to be thinking about the post-purchase, the onboarding, the customer success, the account management, the expansion. All of those implications are incredibly important. So they need to understand what a green light looks like, where there's an excellent fit, what a marginal fit looks like, where it's an orange light or a red light with alarm bells going off for bad fits. So
the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
So what do we need to do on a tactical level to reinvent data center sales teams, reinvent data center professionals to thrive in the AI, the artificial intelligence era? Well, again, think about how to reposition your sales team so they're seen more as advisors, as consultants, as thought leaders. In a lot of ways, the idea of consultative selling is not new. The Challenger sale, early 2010s, has been around a long time. There's a lot of people that have been in and around the data center industry for 10 or more years that have been aspiring to have the classic doctor-patient relationship, where they diagnose before they prescribe, as opposed to pitching the same prescription to everyone else. Because let's face it, in the era that we live in now, where there's instant gratification, instant information, 7/24, 365, this is the remote control of our lives, right? It's the first thing we look at in the morning when we get up. It's the last thing we look at before bed, and we're looking at it dozens, if not hundreds of times throughout the day. Sales pros are no longer the gatekeepers of information. Search engines, mobile, crowdsourced reviews, social media, and especially chatbots have now won that battle. So what do we do to continue adding value? Well, we need to get out of the vendor box, and we need to stay out of the vendor box. How do we do that? Well, we should be using the best possible marketing technology, sales technology, CRM, sales enablement tools to accelerate, anticipate what our prospects are going to want next. It should go without saying that everyone on your sales team needs to be super comfortable on video. If they're not, set up clinics, set up workshops, and help them practice and role play with each other, both for creating videos that get embedded onto pages, that get it sent out on a personalized basis, for conducting small group conferences, for conducting demos, webinars, whatever you need to be able to accelerate your process. They also need to be really good at smart social selling. This doesn't mean just publicizing your company's news releases, because 80-90% of the traffic that data center sales professionals are generating on LinkedIn, in most cases, is yay, clap for us, we're opening new locations, we hired new people, we won new awards, we got new certifications. That's good for the 80 or 90% of the people that already know, like, and trust your company. But for the 80% that have no awareness that your company exists yet, it doesn't do very much. And all of this context should get pulled into your CRM. So by the time your sales team is going out to meetings, they have a really good 360 holistic view of how someone found your company, the topics that they're most interested in. It goes without saying that in the year and era that we're in right now, everyone should have access to being able to see the website pages that a particular prospect has viewed, the forms that have been filled out, the webinars they've attended. All of that context should be there, so you can see if they keep looking at the same page over and over and over again, if they're opening the same kinds of emails that all have the same kind of subject lines. That context should inform how your sales team is personalizing going forward, and then realizing that no individual stakeholder is driving the sale forward anymore. It's all decision by committee. We got to look at the account level, what else is going on. To make this happen, think of encouraging your sales team to be the consummate thought leadership consumers and webinar attendees, even if they're not quite ready to be content creators or content producers at this stage. What does this mean? Well, when your prospects have shown up and they have attended the webinar, and you're talking to them next, you better be sure that you have watched that webinar and can talk to them about what they've learned and how that applies to their business, and taking it deeper through a discovery exploratory process and how it connects the dots with you, eventually your solutions recommendations. That is a vital role for educating and building trust with prospects, is consuming the same content, at least from your company, if not a little broader in the industry, so you can have great, intelligent conversations with them. The sales professionals that want to truly master the doctor-patient consultative relationship really need to allocate some serious time each week to keeping up with, at the absolute minimum, your own company's thought leadership, your own company's content that you're putting out in front of that particular buyer persona. There's also a lot of debate about the specialization of roles. If we're bringing everyone much earlier on into the buyer's journey, is there specialization by size? Like if you staffed up a decent sized team, there's different skill sets and different playbooks required to sell a $20K cloud deal to a small business owner versus a $100,000 colo deal to a mid-market CFO, and a 7-figure enterprise deal to a Fortune 1000. And then there's specialization that happens depending on where they are in the journey. Sales development reps versus account executives versus account managers, or customer service reps, customer support reps, customer success reps. There's also a big danger in this kind of world of burying marketing under sales in the organization chart, because in a lot of ways, your prospects are telling you in many, many, many different ways by their refusal to talk to you until they're very far along in the journey, that the way you're marketing and selling to them isn't cutting it anymore. In a digitally transformed world where you have to contend with globalization, commoditization, tech-driven disruption, and competition, having your marketing folks just basically be the gophers to the sales team. The reality is, when marketing is done right, to truly focus on revenue growth, they need to be able to architect a marketing strategy that helps the company as a whole, where SDRs and AEs are part of the puzzle, and CSMs are part of the puzzle, and product is part of the puzzle, and channel enablement is part of the puzzle, and HR is even part of the puzzle, talent enablement. So marketing can only truly help the business as a whole and deliver a world-class game-changing customer experience, CX, when it has the autonomy and resources to get meaningful stuff done. There's been a lot of research on this. Like the pandemic, for example, drove a permanent shift in how we engage with high-value business-to-business audiences. It's really important to establish trust and credibility, especially if your brand is relatively unknown and you're not the established market leader. But cutting through the noise is getting harder than ever. There's a lot of companies that have more than likely dozens or hundreds of options in your niche that are competing for prospects' attention to get found early on in the journey as possible. So you need to, at the end of the day, ask yourself, is your company prepared to compete and win in today's marketplace? Because ultimately, the choice is really yours with how to approach this. If you have any questions that you've thought of beyond that talked about today, feel free to put those in the chat pane. And I'll try to get to as many of those in the next couple of minutes. So the first question that came in was all about leads. How can we improve what we're doing with our lead generation to get more net new leads, to improve our sales funnel, and to overall improve the lead generation impact that our sales team has with business growth? It's really about implementing what we've talked about today so far. It's getting really tuned into just how different your buyers are buying today than they were as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. How they're researching their options, how they're comparing their options, how they're evaluating pricing. It's a very self-propelled driven process now. So to be successful with that, we need to be hyper specific about who the buyers are. We need to define our ideal client profile, our ICP. And within our ICP, our client profile, we need to understand who the people are that are most important for us to build relationships with, to generate leads from. We call these buyer personas. It's based on some basic research and some educated speculation about their goals, their motivations, their challenges. What's keeping them up at 2 o'clock in the morning? What if they get right, we'll get them a big promotion? What if they mess up, could put their career in jeopardy? So once we have consensus on that for an individual kind of person, it's much easier to reshape our sales priorities, our thought leadership priorities, our content priorities, our sales enablement priorities around being the best possible tour guide that we can possibly be, the best possible Big Four consultant that we can possibly be, the best possible content concierge that we can possibly be to our most important buyer personas. So unlike people tell you never to prioritize your, to pick favorites with your children, but with your buyer personas, unfortunately, with limited resources, you really do need to designate a primary buyer persona, a secondary buyer persona, a tertiary buyer persona, maybe your third most important buyer persona, and probably a negative buyer persona. What if they pick something on a form that they fill out? It's going to cause you to say like, hey, there's no way we can help them. I'm going to disqualify them right now and just move on. So the most important part of being successful with lead generation and data center sales going forward is understanding just how much the research and decision-making process has changed. Like 83% of this is over before you get a chance to meet with prospects. And the only way we're going to get to have mind share in that first 83% is by great, helpful, educational, remarkable content that's value focused, that delivers value to their bank account, the relationship bank account, before you ever try to extract out of that bank account by saying, book a demo, book a tour, schedule a sales meeting. That's the best way to generate leads, is to think about what you're going to do to get found as early as possible with the right people, in the right places, at the right time, and most of all, for the right reasons, so they see you as the go-to expert. Next question is, what can we do to help our data center sales team increase exposure and improve brand awareness? What's super important is, again, we need to be really focused on where our company wins. We need to be very cognizant of the case studies. We need to be aware of what's fantastic for onboarding and customer success and expansion, and what the opposite of that looks like. Once we understand where our company's current products and services can best help and what's on the immediate future roadmap, then we work backwards to building a go-to-market playbook that gets us in front of the right people in the right places at the right time and for the right reasons. The right people starts with, again, your ideal client profile and your buyer personas. Why they should pay attention to you in the first place is walking a heck of a lot more than just a mile in their shoes, and understanding truly what they're going through, what they're struggling with, what they're trying to figure out, and becoming a solution to that long before they know about your company's category, let alone your company. If you're waiting for people to search for you when they know of your company, I guess that's great if you work for AWS or Google or Meta or IBM or Rackspace or Equinix or Digital Realty. But unless you have a really famous brand, it's super important to get found as early as possible in the journey as possible, and the awareness and the consideration stages. When they know there's a challenge, when they know there's a problem that they got to figure out, when they know there's a goal that they're trying to achieve, and they have no idea what the solution to that looks like yet, but you can be a great tour guide in helping them to understand what a better state could look like, but you got to meet them where they are first. That's the way to improve your brand awareness. That's the way to improve your exposure. In terms of tactics, marketing needs to be able to be prepared to take leads much later on in the buyer's journey than it historically has. And sales teams, whether it's AEs, account executives, or sales development reps, SDRs, need to be prepared to get involved as early in the journey as possible in a way that makes sense for today's modern buyer. Today's modern buyer is out there looking for information, consuming research information. They're reading blogs, they're reading LinkedIn posts, they're watching videos, they're listening podcasts, they're going to webinars. So even this is doable even for relatively small teams. You could literally have one internal marketing Swiss Army knife in-house and one salesperson or a small sales team in-house. And there's ways to get this done and have a good presence in front of the right people in the right places so that you improve your exposure and improve your brand awareness. But it's all about becoming very self-aware of what your company does, where you can win the best, where you can help clients the most, and building a plan to reach those people as early in their research and decision-making process as possible. Because by default, if you sit around and wait for them to come to you, by the time they come to you, 80-90% of the journey is over. Next question is, seems like a VP of marketing with a small internal team needs a digital marketing agency that can provide strategy, content, website design, SEO, and social media. Would you agree? Agencies are a mixed bag. The reality is, as a marketing leader internally, you are in the business of being your company's chief trust officer. What does that mean? Is anything that you can possibly do across sales, customer success, product, channel partnerships, the executive team. You are in the business of leading by example of what educating and building trust looks like. And if you abdicate that to a third-party agency as opposed to keeping core strategic functions in-house, it's really, really difficult to build enough of that institutional knowledge to lead by example with the rest of the company. So what the ideal hire for a relatively small company is someone that's like the utility player on a baseball team. And I apologize for anyone outside of the US that's not familiar with American baseball, but one of the things that relatively low budget professional baseball teams look to in the United States is versatility. And this versatility is applicable to IT companies, no matter whether you're in the US or in EMEA or in Latin America or in APAC. Versatility is the person that may be 60 or 70% marketing, but when the sales director is out sick or out on their honeymoon or something like that, they can pinch hit and go on a sales appointment. They have versatility enough that if customer success is completely buried or customer support is completely buried, they can knock out a couple tickets a month. Versatility is strong enough that if the product manager has some product interviews that need to happen, that they're shadowing that person and they're shadowing channel. They're versatile enough they can play a lot of different positions. That's what's most important in a relatively small company where you can't necessarily afford to hire a lot of different specialists, is being deep in one area, but being able to get a lot of stuff done in other areas. And if there's specialty things that need to be outsourced, making sure that you really stay in control of all of this. But the educating and building trust and being the thought leader in chief is either going to be anointed to the head of marketing or the head of sales. But the reality is marketing needs to be out in front as much as possible, being company spokesperson and helping the members of the sales team also being company spokespersons and thought leaders. And with that consistent message that positions your company as subject matter experts, consultants, and trusted advisors. And it's really hard to do that if a lot of that institutional knowledge is locked up in a third-party agency where there can be a lot of turnover and their attention is fractured among a lot of different clients. Next question is, what can we do to improve data center go-to-market and pricing strategy? What can we do to improve GTM and pricing in and around the data center industry? Well, what's super interesting about pricing is in the world that we live in today, where so much of the research and comparing options and evaluating pricing happens before sales contact, our ability to have pricing power is foundational to having a great experience and a great role with prospects as early as possible in their journey. So we're the ones teaching them, educating them, teaching them the right questions to ask, framing what other companies similar to theirs are doing in their industry, helping them to line up the criteria that they should be using to evaluate all of the different options. And when you do this well, you're almost guaranteed to be on the short list. And in many instances where it's either a relatively small deal or it's not a regulated industry, you do this right, you may end up being the shortlist, meaning that you have completely neutralized all of the other competitive options because of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase. you have arrived in 20, 22, 24 of those 28 touch points to the point where nobody stands close. Nobody can hold a candle to what you've done with educating and building trust with that particular prospect. So in terms of pricing strategy, in terms of pricing power, in terms of getting out of the vendor box, in terms of not being perceived as a commodity, it is exceptionally important for your sales team to be seen as trusted advisors, teachers, subject matter experts, big four consultants, so much to the point that the interactions that people have with your sales team should transcend it just feeling like a concierge at a four-star resort guiding them about the activities that they should do to get through their journey. It should feel like free consulting. It should be that good if you want your go-to-market strategy for your data center to knock it out of the park and simultaneously be able to command premium pricing. So if time for two more questions before we wrap for today. How does a data center provider compete with cloud? That's a great question. The reality is this is just as much a product strategy question as it is a marketing, sales, and go-to-market question. Why is it a product strategy question? Because a lot of your ability to compete, sure, you need to be able to compete with educational content with complete strangers who've never heard of your company, let alone your category. That's exactly what we're talking about today. But in terms of your feature set, when you get to opportunities and you're diagnosing and you're making recommendations about what a particular prospect should do next, that's when the pedal literally hits the bare metal. Sorry for the bad pun there. On what you can do to stack up against cloud. And are you going up against one of the big three, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud? Or is it a hybrid where they need some co-location, they need some data center presence and control in addition to cloud? Or is it either or? So at the end of the day, this is still an opportunity for content, for sales enablement, an opportunity to help your prospects walk through the journey in a way that helps them to understand how companies and stakeholders within those companies are making similar kinds of research and comparing options and evaluating pricing kinds of decisions. I don't have to tell most of the people that are on this data center sales webinar how much of a movement there is now towards repatriation. What is repatriation? These are all the people that bet the farm on public cloud and have seen the bills, and their CFO, their chief financial officer, is having chest pains over the bills because the sticker shock would be the understatement of the year. So the repatriation from public cloud back into co-location is happening often for financial reasons. It's also many times happening because there's not enough flexibility. And the great part with public cloud is it's super easy to get started fast. As you scale, some of the cracks start to show in what you're doing. So what's super important with all of this is to use this as an opportunity for thought leadership, for content, for educating and building trust. So you're creating the definitive guide, the definitive training, the definitive thought leadership on what mid-market technology manufacturing companies need to think about when they're weighing co-location versus cloud, data center, their own premise data center, their own co-located, their own wholesale, whatever it is, data center versus cloud. It's a content opportunity, and the more you can get your sales team involved in developing and delivering and being a great concierge and tour guide of that content, the more leverage your sales team will have. So one final question for today, before we wrap up, data center sales has changed our webinar for today. One final question is, what can we do to attract data center clients? The $100 million question, or as Jensen Huang for NVIDIA would say, the $1 trillion question. What can we do to attract more and better data center clients? Well, we need to get crystal clear on who those clients are, what they care about, and why they should pay attention to us in the first place. So again, when it comes to building your go-to-market playbook, your sales and marketing strategy, we need to understand where our company wins. Once we have onboarded a new client, where is the onboarding super smooth? Where is the expansion opportunity super smooth? Where is the best cross-selling? Where is the best case study opportunity? Where are we well positioned today with our existing customers? What's most likely to get us more case studies, more logos? Once we do that, we need to work backwards and figure out what the ideal client profile looks like for that kind of company, and who are the most important stakeholders in that company that we need to build awareness, that we need to educate and build trust with, and what do those people, what do those stakeholders care most about. When we're able to do that, we can think about what we need to do to transform our sales team to take an active role, collaborating with our marketing team and working hand in hand with customer success and product, the whole go-to-market team in your company. What can we do to come together and get our company out in front as the best gosh darn teachers in the industry when it comes to that particular company, that particular stakeholder, being extremely empathetic to what they're going through and providing exceptional value throughout the full buyer's journey. That's what we need to do if we want to attract the best data center clients to our company. So again, we're so happy that you were able to join us today for our webinar on data center sales has changed, helping you think through, is your sales team living in the past? I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And I wish you great success in helping to think forward what your sales team needs to do to help continuing to grow your company. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care now.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.